Imagine if Carruthers was to receive a letter from Jesus himself, especially if we were going through a time of struggle or trial or even persecution. How encouraging would it be to get a letter from the Lord? And I really hope that if we did, we would take in every word, we would sit up and take notice, both of the encouragements, but also of any correction that he wanted to share with us. Well, chapters 2 and 3 of Revelation contain 7 letters to the churches in Asia Minor. They arrive at a time of persecution, and the early church was really struggling. In particular, some of the challenges that they had involved idol worship in the culture, emperor power plays, persecution, and a twisting of the truth within the church. Now, all of these impacted the local churches and their ability to continue to be a lampstand, a light into the darkness of the world around them. We saw last month that Jesus himself walked amongst the lampstands, walked amongst the churches. He was in control. He was with them. They were not alone in their struggles. What an encouragement that would have been. And then Revelation chapter 2 starts with a letter to the first of these churches, to the church in Ephesus. Let's read it, shall we? The angel of the church in Ephesus writes, "The words of him who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, who walks among the 7 golden lampstands. I know your works, your toil and your patient endurance, and how you cannot bear with those who are evil, but have tested those who call themselves apostles and are not, and found them to be false. I know you're enduring patiently and bearing up for my name's sake, and that you have not grown weary. But I have this against you, that you have abandoned the love you had at first. Remember, therefore, from where you've fallen, repent, and do the works you did at first. If not, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place, unless you repent. Yet this you have, you hate the work of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the one who conquers, I will grant to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God." So all 7 churches, of all the 7 churches, we're maybe most familiar with this church in Ephesus, because it's where Paul stayed for 2 years as he established a church. We see that in Acts 18. And then later they received the letter to the Ephesian church. The Apostle John himself was a leader there, and so was Timothy. So they did quite well. They also started well. Right at the very beginning, we learned from Acts and Ephesians that the church was taught by Apollos and Priscilla, and then, of course, by Paul. And that the church grew so much that local idol makers were losing business and causing riots because people were turning to God from idols. When Paul writes to the Ephesian church, he commends them for their faith and their love. He also encourages them not to see themselves as Greek and Jewish, but rather as a family, and he prays that their love would abound more and more. But what was it like to live in Ephesus at this time? What kind of environment was their lampstand shining into? Well, Ephesus was a big trade centre and a seaport. It was also the centre of the worship of the god Artemis, who was the god of life and fertility. This temple to the god of Artemis was one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world. It stood so tall and had this tree outside it where people would come, hoping that touching the tree would bring healing. Idolatry was rife in Ephesus. You couldn't buy or sell, even in the marketplace, without offering incense to Artemis. Part of the worship of this god involved sexual immorality and prostitution. By offering your body to the god as an act of worship, people thought that they would be blessed with life and health and fertility. This even infiltrated the church. It led to a sect of Christian believers called the Nicolaitans, who believed that the body and soul were somehow separate. Only the soul was sacred and the body didn't matter to God. So you could do what you wanted with it, including getting involved in some of the immorality that was happening. But Artemis wasn't the only god worshipped in Ephesus. In fact, there were 14 temples to different gods in the city. And seeking to assert himself above all of them was the emperor. He had great palaces and gardens of paradise. And at the time of writing this letter, it was the Emperor Domitian who was in power. He wanted to unite the whole of the Roman world by getting them to worship him. No wonder the believers faced opposition. Now, Domitian was second to only Nero in being an emperor who prided himself in persecuting Christians. So how did the Ephesian Christians fare in the midst of all of this? There are some great encouragements we read in this letter, but there's also a warning that believers in Ephesus and from every generation need to heed. And you're going to be chatting about that in your groups. And I hope that as you do that, you'll be able to make connections between their culture and our culture and see just how important it is that we do not lose our first love, but remain faithful so that our lampstands may continue to shine. So here are some questions. Your home group leaders should have a copy of these. And yeah, I just hope and pray you have a blessed time as you work your way through them and talk about and get into the text together.